We've learned English noun inflection. It's time to move on to Greek noun inflection. So in this session, we're going to look at how you change the form of a Greek noun based on its function and its meaning, introduce you to the Greek cases, and I also want to talk about Strong's and his numbering system. It all comes up at this point. So let me start with this slide. This is a Greek word for God. It's pronounced theos. And there's two really important parts to this word. There's the stem, the theta, epsilon, omicron, and there's something called a case ending, which is the sigma. The way a Greek noun inflects is that you take the stem of the word and you add a case ending onto the end of the word. That's the inflectional pattern. Now, as I said in the last session, in English, we use word order to say this is the subject, this is the direct object, okay? You got to throw it away, okay? It doesn't affect Greek. There is a rhyme or reason to Greek word order, but it's a totally different system than we have in English. What happens in Greek is that, if you can say, is there a normal word order? Well, there's kind of. The normal Greek sentence starts with a conjunction, has a verb, has its subject, has its object, okay? But that word order is changed almost every single sentence you read in the New Testament. That's why it's kind of odd to talk about normal word order. Well, if you don't use word order to indicate that this verb is the subject, or word order to indicate that this word is the direct object, how do you indicate that? What's the linkage is the word I use. What is the linkage to say this word belongs as the subject of this verb? This word is the direct object of this verb. That's what case endings do. Case endings are the linkage between nouns and verbs. Take this sentence, for example. Agapison hatheos ton kosmon. Okay, agapison is he loved, and then you have hatheos, which is God, and you have ton kosmon, which is the world. Well, who's doing the loving? Now you got to take your theology out of the picture for a second. Who's doing the loving? Well, you can't rely on word order. This could say agapison ton kosmon hatheos, and it would mean the same thing. In other words, you could switch theos and kosmon. So how do you indicate what the subject is? That's what the case endings are doing. So the sigma on the end of theos indicates that it's the subject of the verb. The nu on the end of kosmon indicates it's the direct object of the verb. Now, we have different names for the cases in Greek. In English, we called it subjective. In Greek, we call it the nominative case. So the sigma is a nominative case ending that's put onto the stem thea to indicate that theos is the subject of agapison, that God is doing the loving. We don't call it the objective case, we call it the accusative case. And the nu is an accusative case ending that's put on the end of the stem kosma to indicate that kosmon is the direct object of agapison. So I guess if you wanted to say the world loved God, it would be, hey, agapison, ha kosmos, ton theon. In other words, you'd have to flip the case endings, put theos in the accusative, put kosmon in the nominative. But anyway, that's what case endings are doing. They are suffixes added to the end of the stem of the noun to indicate the function in the sentence. Let me show you why this is really important. Here's John 3:16. If anybody says, oh, I want a literal Bible, well, here's your literal Bible, okay? All right, let me just read this for you, what it would be in English if you would go word for word. John 3:16, hutos, in this way, gar is for, agapison, loved, God, the world, so that the Son, the only he gave, in order that each the believing into him not perish, but have life eternal. Okay, no one but an interlinear is going to translate John 3:16 literally, all right? But the point here is I wanted you to see, here's a whole bunch of Greek words. And the verb is agapison. Well, where's the subject? Well, it could be a lot of places in the sentence, couldn't it? So what you do in Greek is that you go look for something in the nominative case. And as you look down there, you see, hatheos is nominative. It's doing the loving. Then you go look for the direct object. You're looking for something in the accusative. Oh, ton kosmon. That's what is being loved. Okay, you see how it works? And theos and kosmon could be on the second line. They could be on the third line. That'd be quite a ways away. But they certainly could be on the second line of this verse. And it wouldn't matter because it's not word order that determines function. It's case ending. And that's the key. And you got to stop thinking about word order and start thinking about cases. So in terms of inflection, we have, there are 4 cases in Greek. So far, we've seen 2 of them. A word is in the nominative case if it's functioning as a subject of the verb. It's in the accusative case if it's functioning as a direct object. Okay, but what else can inflect a noun? Well, number can inflect a noun. In other words, you can have singular nouns, you can have plural nouns, obviously. Well, how do you do it? Well, you have different case endings, okay? So there's going to be a nominative singular case ending, and there's going to be a nominative plural case ending. So, for example, if you have the word for friend, if you have one friend, it's philos, and the sigma is the nominative singular case ending. Or if you had more than one friend, it's philoi, and the iota is a nominative plural case ending. So in traditional Greek, these are the patterns that you have to memorize. You have to know that the sigma indicates nominative singular, the iota indicates nominative plural. In Greek, for the rest of us, this approach to dealing with the language, you just move your mouse over the word in your software program or check it out in my interlinear, and it'll tell you it's singular or plural. Okay, so you're not going to have to figure that out, but you have to know what's going on, what inflection looks like, okay? All right. But Greek nouns are also inflected based on gender. Now, if I refer to my wife, I'm going to say she. If I'm going to refer to my dog and I'm mad at him, I might say it. But my German Shepherd is a male, so I'm going to refer to him as a he, right? In other words, that's called natural gender. In other words, what pronoun you use is determined by what it's referring to, the antecedent. And so I wouldn't call Terry my brother, she's my sister. I wouldn't call David my sister, he's my brother. See, those are different words, but they indicate different genders. Well, in Greek, it's a little more complicated than that. There is some natural gender that you would refer to a male with a masculine pronoun, you would refer to a female with a female pronoun. But the fact of the matter is that all Greek nouns have gender, and most of them are not natural gender. In other words, you can look at the word and you can see its gender, but if it's masculine, it doesn't mean it's a masculine concept. Or if the word is neuter, it doesn't mean it doesn't have gender. It just doesn't. That's just the way it is. So, for example, the Greek word for sinner is hamartolos. Hamartolos is a masculine word. It doesn't mean a male is a sinner. Now, males are sinners, but for a totally different reason. Now, if the girls are smiling right now, I'll point out that the Greek word for sin, hamartia, is feminine. That doesn't mean that sin is a feminine trait, okay? If Greek were all natural gender, then you could come to some kind of silly conclusion like that. The word pneuma, the word for spirit, it's neuter. That doesn't mean the Holy Spirit lacks personhood. That would be called heresy, all right? The Spirit is a he. It's not an it, even though pneuma is neuter. You see the issue? So let me summarize. There is natural gender in Greek. You see it in the pronouns. You see it in a word like adelphos, that means brother. And if you want to say sister, you change the gender to adelphe. So you have some natural gender, but in the vast majority of cases in Greek, the nouns follow grammatical gender, not natural gender. And there's a lot of reasons why words are the gender they are, but it rarely has anything to do with meaning, okay? Hamartolos is masculine, hamartia is feminine, pneuma is neuter. Doesn't really affect the meaning of the words at all, okay? But you do have variation based on gender. Lexical forms. How are you going to find a word in the dictionary? Well, what you're going to do is look up its lexical form. The lexical, we call them, most people call them dictionaries. For some reason, we call them lexicons. So the lexical form is the base form of a noun or any word, and where it's listed in the dictionary. When it comes to nouns, the lexical form is nominative singular. So if it's like logos, it's a masculine word, its lexical form is going to be nominative singular masculine. If it's the word for hour, hora, it's a feminine, its lexical form is going to be nominative singular feminine. But anyway, when you're looking for the lexical form, you're looking for the nominative singular form. Okay, that becomes really important when we talk about Strong's numbers. Let's talk a bit about when you're sitting down at your computer and you are doing your mouse over and you put it over a word and a bunch of information appears below. What is that? Well, let me just kind of introduce it to you. But first of all, there's going to be what's called a gloss. A gloss is a real basic meaning of a word. The Greek word is going to mean a lot more than just that gloss. But again, the gloss is just a very, very basic meaning. So if you did a mouse over and it came up and the Greek word was ace, the gloss might say into. Ace is the preposition that means into. Well, ace also means in. It also means with reference to. Ace has a lot of words it can mean. And so you can't put all of those words when you do a mouse over. So the dictionary that the program is using has chosen a gloss, one or two real basic words that reflect the basic meaning of the word. When we get into word studies, and we're going to expand that a lot. But anyway, that's the first thing that's going to come up is the gloss. Then probably what's going to come up is the lexical form. So if you had, in Greek it was ton kosmon, if it was accusative singular. When you do the mouse over, it's going to say ha kosmos. In other words, it's going to give you the lexical form. It's going to give you its nominative singular form, the dictionary form. And then it's also going to give you parsings. And the parsing is just breaking down the inflection. It's going to tell you the case. It's going to tell you the number. It's going to tell you the gender, okay? Now, there may be other stuff coming up in your computer program, but that's the basic stuff that's coming up. You're going to get a gloss. You're going to get its lexical form, where you could find it in the dictionary, and then it's going to give you basic inflectional information. It's parsing information, okay? All right. So let's go back to cases, and let me fill out the case. And this chart here shows you all four of the cases. There's four cases in Greek, basically. They're called the nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. A word is put in the nominative case to indicate it's the subject of the verb. A word is put into the genitive case in order to show possession, the idea of or my. A word will be put into the dative case to indicate lots of different things, to indicate that the word is an indirect object, or to indicate that this word conveys the idea of to, in, or by. And I'll spell these all out in a bit. And a word is put into the accusative case to indicate that it's the direct object. And so, for example, in the far right-hand column, you can see different inflected forms, right? So logos is nominative singular, means word. Lagou, the upsilon, is a genitive case ending, so it's indicating that lagou is in the genitive case. It's indicating some kind of possession. On lago, notice it's got an iota subscript under the omega. This is why iota subscripts are so important. That iota tells us that this word is dative singular and conveys the idea of to, in, or by. And the nu on logon is the accusative case ending, telling you that logon is functioning as the direct object of a verb. Okay, makes sense? All right, it's really important that you learn that chart, so you may want to write it down, or it's in the book, and make sure you get those basic ideas cemented in your head. Now, if you were learning traditional Greek, what you would be doing is memorizing all of these inflectional patterns. In fact, somebody printed out a chart. It's probably 3 feet by about 2 feet with a 10 to 9 point font, and it's got every inflectional pattern of every noun, every verb, and it's front and back. Okay, that's what the poor people in traditional Greek have to learn, or at least parts of that. That's all being saved for you because you're going to do the mouse over and the computer's going to tell you what it is. But I thought I'd show you this slide just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that traditional Greek has to teach. So for example, the paradigm, it's called a paradigm, and it's listed nominative, genitive, dative, accusative. And in this case, logos is one of the many masculine patterns. Graphe is one of the feminine patterns. Hora is a different feminine pattern. And ergon is the neuter pattern. Well, you can see it can be kind of hard, isn't it? Because you have a nu in the lower left-hand corner in logon, but you also have a nu in the upper right-hand corner of ergon. One indicates accusative singular, another one indicates nominative singular. Anyway, I just want you to appreciate all the work that the computer program is doing to parse these words for you. And as I said, what will happen to indicate plural is you'll have a totally different set of endings. So that logos will go to logoi. Lagou will go to lagon. You can see that in the chart. A lago with an iota subscript goes to lagois. The iota comes back up and you get a sigma. Lagon goes to lagus. So these are all inflectional patterns that you learn in traditional Greek, but the reverse interlinears and the computer programs just parse them for you. But again, you have to understand what inflection is to make sense of all that, okay? Okay, let me show you a couple of actual verses, and you'll get to see some of this stuff actually in action. The main function of the nominative case is to indicate the subject of a sentence. So in John 1:1, the Word was with God. Halagos, that sigma is your nominative singular case ending, indicating that logos is the subject of the verb ein, and so we know that it's the Word was with God, John 1:1. The accusative is used, among other things, to indicate the direct object. In other words, you're going to put an accusative case ending onto the noun to indicate that it's acting as the direct object of the verb. So in Mark 2:2, the verse says, he was speaking the word to them. He was speaking the word. So elale is the verb, autois is to them, and ton logon, there's your direct object. The new one, logon, is an accusative case ending and indicates that it's the direct object of the verb elale. He was speaking the word to them. So we switch over to the dative case, and the first use of the dative case, and a common use, is to indicate the indirect object, right? So if we look at John 5:27, in Greek it's exousian edokin auto chrisit. Okay, exousian is the noun authority. It is accusative case, even though I'm not illustrating it. Edokin is the verb he gave. Auto is dative. See that iota subscript? That's the indication that it's a dative singular. And then chrisid is from the word chrisis, meaning judgment. And so it's he gave him authority in reference to judgment. So we just say he gave him authority to judge. But the important point is that auto is in the dative case because it's the indirect object. He didn't give him, he gave authority. Exousian is the accusative, that's the direct object. But he gave it to him. And now let's look at the genitive. The basic idea is of, the idea of possession. So you have Acts 6:4, which is we will devote ourselves to prayer, and the ministry, and diakonia, is ministry. And you say, well, ministry, what kind of ministry? Well, the genitive is telling you what kind of ministry. It's ministry of the word. In other words, preaching. So to lagu is in the genitive, indicating an of relationship to diakonia. It's so close to what we do in English that it reads very naturally. And the other thing that I said about the genitive is that it indicates possession, of me, my, so you can see why they're related. And so, for example, in Matthew 4:6, is that he will give his angels charge concerning you. Tois angelos is dative plural, to the angels of him, autou, to the angels of him, to his angels, he will give charge. Greek doesn't have the apostrophe S construction, so everything is in a sense the of construction. So it's the angels of him, okay? All right. So that's it for Greek noun inflection, but I need to bring in a quick little extra. It's not in the textbook, actually, but I need to tell you a bit about Strong, Dr. Strong, because we use Strong's numbers so much. And let me give you just a real brief history of what's going on. Dr. Strong was a professor at Drew Theological Seminary, 1822 to 1894. And he came up with the idea of creating an exhaustive concordance. And what he wanted to do was to hook every English word to every Greek word. And he wanted to do it for, I'm assuming where the phrase Englishman comes from, it's not for people who know Greek. It's for Englishmen, anyway. And so he had to come up with a numbering system. So he took all the Greek words, and he worked on this with about 100 of his buddies, and they numbered every Greek word there is. And then they tied that number to every time that word occurs in the New Testament. So it's really kind of nice. We can use Strong's numbers to tie an inflected form like kosmon, accusative singular, to its lexical form kosmos. And we also use that same Strong's number to tie kosmos to the word world. So in other words, we're using, and the computer programs are using something like Strong's in the background to tie all these words together. Well, the problem is Strong numbered 8,674 Hebrew words and 5,624 Greek words. All right. The problem is he was working on a set of Greek manuscripts that are different from the ones we use today. And the Greek manuscripts that lie behind the NIV and the ESV and all the modern translations, except for the New King James, use slightly different Greek manuscripts, and there's a lot more words at play in these other manuscripts. In fact, there's 444 other words. So what happened historically is that Zondervan Publishing got John Kohlenberger and his teacher, Goodrich, to come up with a different numbering system. And it's Goodrich Kohlenberger, and hence we call them GK numbers. The GK numbers are doing the same thing that Strong's numbers are doing, but it's a different numbering system. Now, most people out there use Strong's numbers, but I use GK numbers for everything I've done. And like if you use some of the software programs that use my database, they will show you both the Strong's and the GK's number. I just wanted the fuller system to make sure I wasn't trying to tag a word that Strong hadn't done a number for. So anyway, that's historically what's going on behind the Strong's numbers and the GK numbers. They are, a number was assigned to every different lexical form, and then that number was used to tag each Greek word in the biblical text. So we use the Strong's number to connect the inflected forms, kosmon, accusative singular, to its lexical form, kosmos, nominative singular, and then to tag kosmos and link it over to the dictionary article on world. See the connection? That's what's going on in these numbering system. And now that you know what inflection is, that actually can make sense, right? So when you do your mouse over and what pops up, it gives you inflected, lexical form, and a Strong's and or a GK number to make all those connections. All right. So that's it for noun inflection in Greek.